experience, specifically customer experience. Customer experience is the new marketing, and that's what we're talking about today. Hop on in to thatgeek.com/live right now so you can be part of the conversation, not just a spectator, but actually come in, join us as we get started. Come on in. So welcome to thatgeek.com. My name is Ifat Cohen. I am your host, and today we are talking customer experience with the one and only Dan Gingiss. Dan, I'm saying it right? Can I say it right? I can't hear you. What happened?
I'm on mute.
There you go. Now I can hear you. Am I saying your name right?
Gingiss, yes, but you're very close.
I'm very close. I have a history of messing people's names up, but I feel it's okay because everybody messes my name, so we're on, even terms here. So guys, if you're watching us right now, hop on in to thatgeek.com/live so you can be part of this conversation about customer experience, because once you nail customer experience, you will have retention, you will have referrals, you will have an army of people doing the marketing for you. So you don't have to work so hard to get the word out there. It all boils down to one thing, which is experience, and that is the way to differentiate yourself this year and next from everybody else in the marketplace. Now, there's a lot of ways to mess this up. A lot of people are focusing on AI, on automation, more on the data points rather than the people. And today we're going to talk about customer experience in real time with Dan Gingiss. And Dan, you are also the co-host of a podcast that talks about experience this, and that's all you do, right?
Yeah, so our podcast is called Experience This, and I co-host it with Joey Coleman, and we share experiences from companies all over the world that are doing things really, really well and focusing on their customers. And really, we try to grab the takeaways from each one of those stories so that people can go back to work the next day and implement them at their business.
So customer experience, as I understand this, it's a wide skill, right? Like if you're talking about corporate America, there's like a position for customer experience, but they're not really interacting with the customer in real time. They're more trying to connect all the departments kind of like in silo and make sure that everybody in the company is contributing to a good experience. Do you find that there is like a disconnect between what customer experience really is and what management wants and leadership wants and what's happening actually in corporate?
It's a great question. I mean, there's really two ways that companies tend to go about customer experience. The first is by saying that customer experience is everyone's job. And I think that's correct. Even if you're in the finance department, for example, you're sending out invoices that are part of the experience for your customers or your clients. If those invoices are not clear or if they're incorrect, that's going to affect the experience. The other method is to have a department that is actually in charge of the entire experience. And that does help with some of the silos that you mentioned, where that team is got the 30,000-foot view and can look at the connections between experiences, which is generally where companies drop the ball, is the handoff from one experience to another.
So when you're working in customer experience for as long as you have, what's like your biggest frustration with that? I don't know if it's a market, right? But like with that topic, if you will, or with that position?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most difficult thing is getting buy-in from the top, because when executives are bought into using customer experience as a differentiator, that does filter down to the rest of the organization. And I like to say that, especially in today's world, competing on price is a loser's game. just look at the gas station down the street
Right.
and, who has its competitor on the other corner. If they're competing on price, they're going to end up giving away the gas for free. And competing on product is also very difficult today. And to that, I would say, look at a company like Uber that completely revolutionized an industry and then basically got copied by other competitors that might even be doing it better now than they are. And so competing on product is also very tough. So what's left is competing on customer experience. And what's nice for companies is that the way you create a customer experience is through your employees. And every company's got different and unique employees. So when you have an executive team that's really bought into, we're putting the customer first, we're making decisions that are right for the customer, and then the profit will follow, that's how you get it into the culture. And so I would say, you asked what was the most frustrating is when there's companies where they're trying to build customer experience from the bottom up, and that's really, really hard to do.
So you would prefer the leadership to start to have that vision and that culture of a customer experience, and that actually will filter down to the way the employees are behaving. But that to me still kind of feels like that's inside the company. How do you move customer experience from the silos of the departments out into the customer?
So the reality is that consumers today want a relationship with the companies that they do business with. That wasn't always true because we didn't necessarily have a means for a relationship. In the past, if we wanted to communicate with a company that we did business with, we wrote them a letter, or maybe we called their toll-free number, and that was pretty much all we had. And now with chat and web and mobile and social media and other mechanisms, we actually can establish a much more human relationship with the companies that we spend our hard-earned money with. And I think the companies that are doing this right understand that their customers are not just an account number, but they're human beings on the other end that want a human relationship. And so that's when customer experience comes outside, is when your customers really feel like you're not an ivory tower, you're not a building, you're not a name on the wall, but you're actually a company made up of human beings.
And so to do that, do you have to have like one point of contact for each customer? For example, I interviewed JB Kellogg of Marketing 360, and they're a marketing company that hardly does any automation, and they're the fastest growing company in the country. And the reason I got to JB was because one of his employees, I now have a personal relationship with him. We started texting, then we jumped, then I know where he lives, I know his brother, I know everything about him. And now it's not like, oh, Marketing 360, it's Jordan there, right? And if I need anything, like Jordan messaged me Happy New Year and stuff like that. And from that, I was like, wow, this is such a cool company. I would love to talk to the owner and see how did you develop this type of company without the automation and manage to grow. And it boils down to what you're saying. It's the relationship, right, with the customer that you're having, but the personal relationship to the point of like, I have a text number, right? I have a cell phone. So is that something that we are going towards? Like you have to know personally someone in a company to feel that you're connected to it? Or do you have different ways to make people feel like, no, we actually care about you, but my cell phone is my cell phone kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it depends on the industry. So especially in B2B, people buy from salespeople that they like, and they establish a relationship with that salesperson, and that's often why certain salespeople are more successful than others. The problem in a B2B space is that salesperson often makes the sale, and then the first thing they do is hand the client off to somebody else.
Yeah.
And the client is left to say, well, hold on a second, I liked working with Steve, and now all of a sudden I have to work with John. So in some companies, I think, yeah, you can have that single relationship. In other companies, take Starbucks, for example. The thing that Starbucks does well is no matter which Starbucks you go in, you know that you're going to have a certain caliber of barista behind the counter. You know that if you go in there more than 2 or 3 times, they're going to start to remember your order and remember your name. And you can establish a personal relationship even if you're only in there once because it's, you're visiting a town and you walk into a Starbucks. And that's because they've created a consistent experience that when you walk in the door, it's warm, it's comfortable, it smells like coffee and pastries, and you're sort of taken into, they refer to it as the third place, but you're taken into a place that's comfortable and that no matter where you go in the world. So it really depends on the type of business that you're in, but it does always come down to some human contact. Even when you're talking to a customer on social media, for example, a lot of companies have their customer service agent sign their name or their initials. So that it feels like I'm talking to Sally, not I'm talking to company XYZ.
So one of the things you were talking about is figuring out the pain points, right? The pain points of the customer, and a lot of people will not come to you and say, "Hey Dan, I really don't like the way that you treated me," or whatever you said, right? But they'll go out to Twitter and be like, right, or Google, and just like blast it all over the web where you couldn't have perceived that. So how do you find the pain points before the customer is so annoyed that he goes out and rants on social media?
Yeah, so it's a combination, I think, of looking at the data and listening to your customers. So let's take a website, for example. Most companies have a website. Sometimes it's just a viewing website, and sometimes it's like an account center, like a credit card where you log in and have to do things. And the data of running a website can be extremely valuable. How do people find you? What did they search in Google to get to you? How long did they spend on a page? Which pages did they go to? When do they drop off? That's just data, right? But you can also listen to customers. So if you have a feedback form, it's amazing how many companies solicit feedback, but then don't actually read the feedback.
Yeah, that's true.
Do anything with it.
Right.
If you're listening on social media, people may be talking about you even though they're not tagging your brand, right? On Twitter, we can talk about a brand without actually doing an @ mention, right? And so brands should be listening for that and then trying to learn from it and also participate in the conversation. When you put those two things together, it can be really, really powerful. I have an example if you want me to share.
Please. Yeah.
When I worked at Discover. So when I worked at Discover, we had thousands of pages on the Account Center website. And at the bottom of every page, there was a feedback mechanism. We had a software where at any time you could click on a little button and leave us feedback about that page. And one of the questions that we asked when you clicked on the feedback was, how easy is it to do business with Discover? Mm-hmm. So I ran a report that gave me the list of pages sorted by that score. And I wanted to know what are the pages that people think are the most difficult. So the page that came to the top as the single most difficult page was actually a really important page to us. It was the refer a friend page. So if you refer someone else to Discover Card, they get $50, you get $50. And I said, so why is this such a difficult page to use? So that's the data. The data showed me that it was difficult. I then went into the comments that were just about that page, and it became very clear to me that on a certain browser, the submit button wasn't working. It wasn't even showing up. So people were putting in their friends' names and email addresses, and then there was nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Send. And it was frustrating people. Now, I would not have noticed that because that was those complaints, maybe there were 30 of them out of 1,000. So they weren't rising to the top, there weren't enough of them. But as soon as I paired the data of people are saying this is difficult numerically, and then the qualitative listening to the customer, which is here's their comment, it became crystal clear what we had to do. We fixed it overnight, and by the next day, that score of how easy is it to do business with Discover went right back up to a normal score.
Nice. And I'm assuming referrals went right back up too.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
So you worked at McDonald's, at Discover, at Humana, completely different companies. What do they have in common in terms of customer experience?
Well, I think that what they have in common is a desire to know their customer and a desire to be responsive to their customer. I think what both financial services and healthcare have in common is a lot of regulation that sometimes gets in the way of having that relationship with the customer.
Yeah.
And not to get political or anything, but sometimes I think regulation has a really good intention, but then the applicability in the real world doesn't necessarily get to the conclusion that the regulation was trying to get to. And so you often have cases where companies are restricted from answering questions or from engaging because of different rules, and that can be really frustrating, really difficult. But I think that at least the companies I worked for, they all have the right intention of, we want to know our customers, we want them to be happy with us, and we want to serve them well.
And so one of the things that you do is, I believe that was a Forbes magazine. You write to Forbes as well, right? And you did a survey of like 2020 trends in customer experience. And one of the things that one of the experts said, Mike, he said, get off the data and actually meet with your customer face to face, have a conversation with them, right? Forget AI for all that stuff. What's your take on that?
Absolutely true. I mean, if you're not talking to your customers, you're missing out on so much information about how to make your company better. Especially when they're asked, customers are going to give you feedback. Now, you got to be ready to take the feedback because it may not all be positive. But I always like to say that you should never fear complaints, because most of the people that are upset with your business just leave and go to your competition, and they don't even tell you why they left. So the ones that are complaining, even if they're complaining on Twitter in public, generally they're complaining because they care and they want to continue the relationship with you, but they're disappointed in you. And so they want you to fix something. And if you're willing to objectively listen and say, yeah, you know what, I think maybe we didn't give this person the experience that we were hoping to give them, and let's try to resolve that, you often can turn a detractor into an advocate. And you all of a sudden have somebody that started off upset with you, and now they're singing your praises in public because you listened and you responded.
I love that. And as you know, we are bringing the conversation in real life. So speaking of that, guys, if you want to be part of this conversation, in about 10-15 minutes, we're going to open it up. I'm thatgeek.com/live. Come on in. Right below the video, there's a button. Click the button. Hop on in and let me know that you want to be part of the conversation. We can just meet each other face to face. Because I think, right, Dan, technology today can make it so easy to connect people together. And yet there seems to be some kind of a fear to actually be personal with your clients. And I think it's because, like, back in the day, right, marketing was kind of like the podium. You stood behind the podium, you were admired, you were the guru, and, you know, we all kind of like wished we got 2 seconds of your time. And now marketing has changed, like you said, where there's so many ways to communicate, and expectations have changed completely. And it's so much easier to just switch, right, between one client to another, one company to another. And it's much harder when you are a solopreneur, as many of our viewers are, they don't have departments, they don't have, you know, customer experience and customer sales and customer support and data and all that stuff. So how does the solopreneur, or like a company of like maybe 2-3 people, how can they integrate customer experience into their operations so that they're winning and they're standing out and they're not losing to the big guys?
Well, I have a feeling you were leading the witness a little bit here, because I'm a solopreneur, and so I'm doing that myself. And what I would say, you know, from my perspective, I always feel like I have to practice what I preach. So, for example, when I'm doing a keynote speech, I make sure that I create an experience for the audience so that my speech is memorable to them. And hopefully they go back to their office and they're like, I see what he did there. He was teaching me how to create memorable experiences while he was creating a memorable experience.
Nice,
right?
yeah.
And so likewise, I talk about, and I wrote a lot about in my book, about being responsive to people. So I really pride myself that, you know, when people email me or tweet at me, that I will be responsive to them and get back to them quickly, because that's what people expect. And I can't tell other people to do that and then not do it myself. And so I think that we all have to remember, no matter what size business we're in, whether we're solopreneurs or whether we work for the biggest company around, without customers, we don't have a business.
True.
So the customer is not the enemy. The customer is not the problem. We need more customers than we have. Almost every business needs more customers than we have, and we need to keep the ones that we have. So it's really about making sure that you are really putting your customer front and center and being there for them so that they want to do more business with you.
So I love what you said about responsiveness, because that's almost kind of like we're expecting. And it's really funny, you know, when people text you, they're kind of like, where are you? Come on, it's been 2 minutes, right? Right. Yeah. And so we were living in this, like, you know, what do you call that? Immediate response world where it can make it very difficult to be responsive and also get stuff done. I hear that the average, the expected time to respond is like 2-3 hours. Do you find that that's right, or is it like 24 hours?
So it definitely depends on channel. I think in social media, it really is quicker than that for the top companies. But I want to caution your viewers that there's a big difference between a corner store and an international airline, right? An international airline operates 24/7, and people need, when they need help immediately. They're standing in an airport, they've just missed their connection, like they can't wait 2 or 3 hours for you to respond, which is why the airlines tend to be among the best. And I've had at least 2 major carriers respond to me in as little as 2 or 3 minutes on Twitter, which is unbelievable.
Yeah.
The corner store does not have to be that responsive. The corner store that's only open during the daytime and closes at 9 p.m. does not need to answer at 2 o'clock in the morning. They can wait till the next day to answer, because that expectation is a little bit different. What I always tell people, though, is whenever you're going to be active, set the expectation with your customers. Put it on your profile on Twitter or on Facebook. Both of them allow you to put times that you're available and that you're responsive. When you set that expectation, then people aren't disappointed. It's like when a toll-free number, a customer service number says, we're available from 8 to 5. As long as I know that, I'm going to call between 8 and 5, and I'm not going to expect that they're there at midnight. If I don't know that, then I may call at midnight expecting somebody to answer.
That's true. Tell me about like one of the best customer experiences that you've been through. Like, what do you consider like exceptional customer experience?
Well, one of the stories that I love to tell, and probably one of the brands that I get the most feedback from in audiences or clients that I work from, because everybody seems to love this brand, is Chewy.com. And Chewy is a pet supplies company, and they have really figured out how to connect with customers in a way that I've never seen other companies do. I've had a number of people tell me that they've had pets that have passed, and they've had to call and cancel a subscription to food or whatever it is, and Chewy responds by not only canceling and refunding their money, but by sending flowers in the mail to them.
Oh, wow.
And sending a condolence card, right? And if you think about how amazing that is, somebody who's just lost their pet, in theory, has just stopped being a customer of Chewy.
Right.
But they know that pet owner is likely to go get another pet somewhere down the line, and you can bet where they're going to buy their pet supplies at that point. They've also done some amazing things with customer service. I tell a great story about a woman who left a review on the Chewy website, not about Chewy, but just about one of the products that Chewy sells. It's not even a Chewy branded product. And she left a negative review, and she got an email from Chewy talking about how they were very sorry that she was disappointed with the product. They gave her a refund, even though she didn't ask for one. And they made recommendations on other products that might be better for her based on her complaint on this product. That's going above and beyond, and it surprised her because she wasn't upset with Chewy. She just wanted to warn other people that this brand maybe wasn't as good as some of the other brands. And yet Chewy saw a customer that might not be happy, and jumped in without being told to, and created an amazing experience for this woman. So that's a company to keep an eye on. I think they're doing everything right, and we've had them. I think we've highlighted them 3 or 4 times on the podcast, because we keep getting new amazing stories, and they keep bettering themselves.
That is so awesome. I would have thought that you'd mention Zappos or Apple even, but I've never heard of Chewy, so this is fantastic. So as a solopreneur, right, aside from being responsive, actually, no, let me take it back. There's a fine line, right? There's a fine line between the customer is always right and customer experience. How do you find that fine line and not just bend over backwards to horrible customers?
That's a great question. And I think that the customer is not always right, but I think they're right more often than we want to give them credit.
Okay,
And so
that's fair.
the truth is that, sometimes what customers say to us hurts, right? Because they've had a bad experience, they're upset, and we don't really want to admit that we provided a bad experience. And that's why I say that, that complaints are so important. And even in the business world, when you get a review at the end of the year from your boss, if all you get is a review that tells how awesome you are, that's not really that helpful. The best reviews are the ones that say, here's your opportunities to get better.
Mm-hmm.
And all of us should want that, and all of us should treat feedback like a gift. I always ask for feedback when I get off stage because I want people to tell me, hey, I loved this example, and you did really well over here. This example didn't really hit the mark with me. And I'll take that feedback and I'll either rework the example or I'll exclude it from my next speech because it's important to me that I'm delivering something that people are excited about and can respond to.
Yeah.
And so I do think that some of it is just checking your ego at the door and being willing to take that feedback, good, bad, and ugly, and get better because of it. Let's not forget that when people compliment us, we also should be taking that and saying, I should be doing more of that, right? Oh,
yeah.
Dan, I really liked this story. Okay, well, guess what? That story is going to stay in my keynote. I'm going to keep doing that story as long as people say they like it. Likewise, if a customer says to you, hey, you did this really well, or thank you so much for remembering my birthday, or whatever, that should tell you, keep remembering their birthday.
Right.
So it does work in both directions.
So I love that because I'm with you. I don't think the customer is always right. I love the ego stuff. It does hurt. But how do you know that it's just, one person's opinion, or generally you're messing up, right? Because I always say this. Do you remember the stuff where they offended, like, oh, I'm offended, There's JP Sears, who always makes satire videos on YouTube, created a whole video about, oh, I'm being offended. And someone is like, here, take this book. It's fantastic for you. It will help you dating. And he's like, I'm offended that you think I'm attracted to women. He's like, aren't you? He's like, yes, but I'm offended that you assume so, right? So how do you know that the person that you're talking to is not just like overly sensitive, or it's just like a word that triggers them but has nothing to do with what you're talking about, or if it's a really, a real issue that you need to address?
Yeah, I mean, especially in today's culture, we have to be a lot more careful because people can get offended at different things. And
Yeah.
I always talk, for example, about using humor in marketing. Humor can be super effective in marketing, but it's also risky.
Yeah.
Because what I find to be funny, you might find to be offensive. And so we have to be careful of that line. And I think that, what I would say is if I ever said something on stage, or if I was ever, consulting with a company that offended somebody, I would apologize, and I would say, look, I didn't mean to offend you. Thank you for letting me understand, why you were offended. I still think you can make that right with somebody. That said, you're right that sometimes, you'll have complaints about, man, your app doesn't work. And it's one person. Yeah. And you test it, and you ask other customers, and the app works for everybody else, and you realize, okay, this is probably user error.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like the machine in front of the machine.
Yeah, exactly. And you try to help that person, but you realize it's not a major problem. Whereas, no joke, I've been at companies that have figured out that their website is down from Twitter. Like even before their IT department figured it out, because when people can't log in, they light up Twitter.
That's true.
And so in that case, hey, thank goodness for Twitter, because we wouldn't have known until our IT department figured out that the site was down. So I think that it is a line, and obviously we do have to be careful not to offend. There was a case that I had at one company I worked for where luckily the marketing team and the customer service team were very well connected, and they communicated with each other. And this is really important to creating good experience, because if marketing goes out there and puts a special or a sale and customer service doesn't know about it, and then you call in and you talk to an agent and they don't have any idea what you're talking about. It's very frustrating. But this company, they had a really good relationship. And there was a television commercial that went on the air and got some feedback from people that was unexpected. People felt that this particular television commercial represented a certain minority group in a way that was not flattering. And certainly that was not the company's intention. And they had done a lot of research, including with that minority group, and had gotten good feedback. But then when it was out in the real world, they heard this kind of feedback. And the good news is that very quickly the customer service team got to circle back with the marketing team and make a decision about whether we're going to pull this commercial or not. And I think they ended up pulling it. But I think the reason it wasn't a PR disaster was because there wasn't any intention to offend, right? Mm-hmm. It just happened that, the joke they told didn't land as well as they thought, and they were willing to hear that feedback and change it.
Yeah, humor is so personal, I always say, right? Because it depends on your culture. It depends where you come from. Yeah, it's a tough one, which is why, side note, have you seen Ricky Gervais' Oscar speech? Why?
You mean the...
No, Golden Globe. What was it? Golden Globe, right.
The Golden Globe.
Yeah. Have you seen that one? I admire that guy because he's like, he doesn't care. But what's amazing to me is like you're talking to an audience that like you want to get a laugh from and you're killing them right on the spot. Yeah. And we're all sitting there like cracking up. But you can see that this was not something that people were having a lot of fun with. So it's very interesting, right? Like one person's humor can be someone else's complete disaster, especially in PR. So before we let people in, and I see Bettina here, Chris is here, fantastic seeing you, Mary, I don't know how to pronounce that koala name, Adil is here. If you guys want to jump in and have a conversation, just raise your head or type yes in the comments and I will bring you in and love to meet you in person. What are your predictions for 2020 marketing, right? We're saying that customer experience is the new marketing. What does that mean and what do you think is going to happen this year?
Well, I think that from the customer experience perspective, companies don't have a choice anymore. I mean, this is necessary to compete in today's market. So the companies that continue to push back against that and refuse to focus on experience, they're going to continue the long line of companies that have gone out of business. And I know Mary, who's on the call, will be happy to talk about that. She put together a list of all the retailers that have disappeared in the last year or two. And it's really unbelievable. But when you look at them, you realize that a lot of them had not changed their experience in decades. And they basically didn't accept that customer experience was a key part to differentiate and to compete. And so I do think we're going to continue to see in 2020 more and more companies focusing on the customer, trying to find ways to differentiate through the experience, because that is, I believe, the one key way to differentiate that's really unassailable. Because again, I could be, McDonald's and Burger King sell roughly, similar products, but the people delivering them at the restaurant could be very, very different. And so that experience could be very different, even though the product may be very similar. I think from a marketing perspective, we're going to continue to see a focus on metrics and results. And social media, for example, I don't think has the long leash that it used to have, where all the social teams, and I led a bunch of these social teams, all the social media folks wanted to say, well, this is a different channel, so it doesn't need to be held accountable for the same metric. You bet it does. With limited budgets, I'm going to put my money, my marketing dollars in channels that perform and that give us results. And the vanity metrics in social media don't mean anything if it doesn't increase the number of customers or the number of sales. So I think that we'll continue to be focusing on metric-driven decisions.
Man, I love that you talked about vanity numbers. That's like my biggest pet peeve, right? Like, who cares how many impressions you have if it doesn't turn into anything? Because people can buy impressions. Who cares? So when you say metrics, let's dive just a little bit into that. What specific metrics, what specific tools are you using or are you recommending people to use to be able to improve the customer experience?
Well, I think one of the biggest metrics to look at is retention. And, I like to tell people that most companies have a leaky bucket. And what's happening is, especially this is very prevalent in the B2B world, is B2B companies are so focused on sales that they're forgetting the fact that there's customers walking out the door in the back end. And if they plug that leaky bucket and don't lose the customers going out the door, they are able to put less pressure on their salespeople. I worked at one company where in order to make every $1 million that they made in sales, they had to sell $1.4 million worth of services.
Oh, wow.
Because they netted out $1 million from the people that were walking out the door. I think that, so when you are providing a good experience, your attrition and retention numbers are going to be affected in a very big way. And I think that is one of the biggest and quickest ways to figure out if you're doing something well.
So retention is the biggie. Are there any tools for the solopreneurs that they can start implementing now to see how they're doing the market or to start engaging with their customers in a better way?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like we've talked about, to not focus on vanity metrics. It doesn't really matter how many followers you have on social media. It doesn't really matter what your reach is. It matters that people are engaging with you. And I see a couple of my good friends on the screen here who are really good at engaging with people. And when they talk, people listen. And it's because they're willing and able to engage. And that is so much more important than some vanity metric that says, hey, I have 1 million followers, when very few of them engage with you.
I love it. Let's hear from them. So hi, Mary. Let me unmute you. Just a second.
Hi, Mary.
There you go. Hey, Mary.
How are you?
Fantastic. How are you? You are not Dan.
No.
So you just created a survey of all the companies that just disappeared?
Well, no, it wasn't a survey. We made a list.
A list, yes.
So we wrote an article, it was maybe last year or even at the end of 2017, just talking about all the companies that disappeared for one reason or another. The truth is that lots of times, like Dan was saying earlier, it's not even because their products weren't good or because the price wasn't right. There's always something else. There's always something a little bit different that can make or break the customer experience in general, right? And that's one thing that we talk about a lot at my company, which is understanding what is making you worth it to your customer.
Ooh, I love that.
One aspect of the experience that's making or breaking. Right?
Yeah, so do you mind, Dan, if we jump into that a little bit? What make it worth to? Yeah. What makes it? What makes you worth to your customer? Did I mess it up? I messed it up.
No.
Well, I actually was.
Yeah, go.
Yeah, where I was hoping you followed to ask Mary about the metrics that she tracks, because I think at Worthix they're doing some really, really interesting stuff.
Yeah, go for it, Mary.
Yeah. So what we believe is that although the experience is extremely crucial, lots of times what people think is the experience is just a single aspect. So when people are talking about customer experience, lots of times they're thinking about the relationship or how the customer is treated when they walk into the door, which has a lot more to do with service than anything else. So when we're tracking experiences, we're tracking every touch point, every moment, every communication, every time the customer has any form of interaction with your brand that causes some sort of emotional response. That's what we're tracking when we're talking about the experience, not specifically service, not specifically the purchase itself or anything like that. It's everything. So one thing that's really important is that what we try to do is looking at the entire experience. What are the specific ones that actually cause the customer to decide to buy from you or not?
And what are they?
I was talking about the competition.
Mm-hmm.
What you see is why do customers churn? We know that there are a lot of companies out there that have holes in their bucket, and the customers are leaving. But why did they choose to? Why the ones who didn't leave? Why did they choose to stay? So what we're able to do with our technology and methodology is understand not only if people left or if they stayed, but why. What was the one experience or what was one aspect about their experience that actually caused them to stay or go? So we've boiled it down to 5 decision drivers.
Okay.
These are aspects of the experience that we're tracking in customers. So the main ones that are more tangible or more concrete and easier for people to understand kind of through metrics are price and quality, right? Those seem to be the most obvious ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has a lot to do with the cost benefit, right? So what you're paying for is what you get.
Yeah.
You're not going to buy a family heirloom on Amazon for $5 coming off a ship from China with 100 gajillion models that are exactly like it.
Right.
And at the same time, there are times that you want something that's cheap just to fulfill a very specific need. So price and quality are intertwined in this relationship that, I mean, there are entire schools dedicated to studying that. But there are other parts of the experience that are a little bit less tangible because it has to do with emotional responses. So, for instance, when you have brand identification, which is how customers perceive your brand according to their belief system,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, I'm based in Atlanta, and in Atlanta, we are the home of Chick-fil-A, which I know the strut up there in the front is also very familiar with Chick-fil-A. And there are a lot of people in the U.S. that really dislike everything that Chick-fil-A stands for, right? What we want to understand as a company is that lack of identification strong enough to get people to not buy the chicken sandwich?
Mm. Didn't Chick-fil-A just have like a big issue with running out of a sandwich or something? Didn't they have like a big
That was Popeye.
Popeye?
That was Popeye, yeah.
See how bad it is? Like I don't even.
Don't mess up your chicken.
Yeah, don't mess up your chicken sandwiches.
Right here. But yeah, so I mean, brand identification is one aspect, but you also have social proof, right? Which is how you're perceived by your friends and family and the people that surround you. So if everyone around you has an iPhone and you're one person with the green bubbles in your group text, and you're ruining the group text experience for everyone, then you might feel pressured into buying an iPhone, right? So the way your social group perceives you is definitely a determiner of purchase or not.
So let's talk about this for a second. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
No, the last one that we consider is relationship. And that's when you get the call centers, that's where you get the treatment that you're receiving in stores, et cetera, et cetera.
Did you find that creating an emotional connection kind of like oversees price and other benefits once someone is emotionally connected to a brand and identifies with the brand? Kind of like I'm a Mac, I'm a PC. Then it doesn't really matter that they go to war for that brand, right?
Well, that's the thing. It depends. It absolutely depends on not only your business model, but your value proposition. So there are companies that their business model relies on creating that sort of emotional identification with the customer. And there are brands that don't rely on that at all.
Mm-hmm.
So, once again, I have done plenty of shopping on Amazon from dealers that I don't even know what they look like because they're hidden behind an Amazon brand.
Right.
And I still return and have business with them if the product is somehow worth it for me or if that experience is worth it.
But I would argue that you're having a relationship with Amazon and you're trusting Amazon, and that's why you're going to these resellers that you don't know.
Sure, but the thing is, the emotional connection might be there with Amazon and what stands behind Amazon, but I never actually know who's on the other side having that interaction with me. So my point is, it really depends.
Yeah.
Dan was talking about Chewy. I'm a Chewy customer. Dan knows this. I buy from Chewy every single month. They're on auto purchase for me until Kingdom Come. And I have an emotional connection with Chewy, and that's important to me. But there are times that Chewy either doesn't carry the product that I'm looking for, or it's going to take a couple days to come and I need something quicker. And I will go anywhere and buy it. Because at that moment, that's what's important. And what's worth it to me is that I get that product sooner rather than later. But what Chewy needs to try to find out is whether that's going to drive me away from their business or not, or whether they're still worth it, even though I can't get things immediately from them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And
so it's a lot of nuances, and the truth is that those drivers, they play out very differently according to different customers and different markets and different demographics and for different companies. But for a company to understand how their main demographic is interacting with their brand and how their consumers perceive them and whether they are perceived as being worth it or not, that's ridiculously valuable to companies.
And I'm going to bring it back. Thank you so much. I'll bring it back to Dan. Dan, it sounds like, almost mission impossible. Because when you're becoming a company, when you start working on a global market, right? And now you have different cultures, different people, different expectations, different languages. How does a company even tackle that, from, from I don't even know what to call it. Like you look at it and you go like, holy crap, all these things, all these places, all these people, all these cultures. How do you do that?
Yeah, it really comes down to knowing the culture. So I've worked at two organizations that were really international. When I was at Discover, I spent 3 years on the Diners Club brand, which is all over the world, not so much in the U.S. And then obviously McDonald's is everywhere. And I think that both of them approached it in similar ways. Funny story, when I was traveling all around the world for Diners Club, they would always tell us about the culture that we were going to try to learn it. And Mary's going to laugh at me for this because Mary's from Brazil. But I messed up once because, as I now know, in Europe they kiss on both cheeks, and in Latin America usually they kiss on one cheek. And so I went
three,
to kiss on the
three, no?
cheek in the wrong place, and it was kind of embarrassing, right? And so but the idea is that in a business setting, you've got to know the culture, right? You've got to know whether you're shaking hands or bowing or hugging or whatever it is, and who you let talk first and what have you. In the McDonald's world, there are, I think it is 5 items on the menu that are everywhere in the world at every single restaurant, and then the rest of the menu in different countries is adapted to the culture. And so, in India, for example, they have far more vegetarian options than they have here in the United States. And so it's about knowing that culture and yet still keeping the brand and still keeping, you can go anywhere in the world and you still see those golden arches so you know where you're at. And you can order French fries anywhere in the world and get the same French fries. But other than that, they're going to adapt in every country. And you're right, it adds another dimension that is complicated. We talked about humor before. Something that might be funny to an American may not be funny to somebody in another country or vice versa. And so you just have to create that it just adds another dimension of complexity.
Yeah, I love that you brought McDonald's in Israel. They're considered like fancy. Like going to McDonald's is not like here. And there's not going to be a shake in a McDonald's branch because dairy and meat are not kosher. So either they're going to say non-kosher and they're going to have the menu, or they're going to say kosher mandala and it's only meat and no shakes. Which I remember my son's dad came to Israel with me and he was like, how can you not have a shake? Like where's the experience? Bettina wants to chime in. Bettina, can you hear us? Can we hear you? Let's see. Let me unmute you. There we go. Hey.
Hi, how you doing? Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Hi, how you doing? Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Do you hear me? Do you hear me clearly? Just want to make sure.
Yes, we do.
Okay, perfect. So, Bettina, thank you so much for touching points on things I've been thinking about as well. So I run Betty Media, I'm not a marketer. So my company, it's a 2 or 3 team people of designers and, strategists. So we're a creative agency that focus on design experience end to end. So user experience and customer experience, which I believe is, equals to brand experience, the overall experience. So you brought up vanity metrics, Gary, and understanding cultures. It's one of the things I've really talked about because you have small businesses who are, depending on those vanity numbers, those vanity metrics, and oftentimes I have to explain to them that, please, it's not about that, use your existing customers you already have. But what has happened is that there is a climate of, those numbers are important to show that you are important, right? And then on one fold, you have people who are, you brought up, Mary, emotional connections, right? And so that's one area where people are not tapping into. Perfect example, yesterday, I'm on Telegram often, so I basically do a lot of work in the tech community, so especially in blockchain. So one of the situations we have in blockchain is that many of us in the industry have been dealing with scammers, scam artists. So it's been giving us a bad light, the industry. So you have people creating these fake personas, fake white papers, you name it. And a lot of people are behind the screen, as you mentioned, Mary, that you don't know who you're talking to, or texting or whatever. And oftentimes I'm having to always ask, let's do a Zoom conversation, let's make a deal over Zoom. But what's happened is a lot of people are not wanting to do that. They're not wanting to get on a phone call because they have grown adapt. How can I say? There's a growing thing about where people just would rather text, AI automation, and I'm trying to get to the whole emotional connection of meeting people. And how do you start doing that? Because it seems like everybody is depending on the technology, and small businesses don't have the cash sometimes, and so they depend on the technology, but it causes havoc, and you don't know who is on the other end. And then you have bigger businesses, they do want to create the emotional connection, but there is how can I say this? There is, as you brought up, the whole commercial, where, some people don't understand certain cultures, they don't have the right people in place to kind of create these experiences. So bigger companies are, so how do you, the question I'm asking is, how do you get people to get away from, I guess, the net and create this emotional connection? Especially for small businesses, that's what they are looking for, because that's how you can create the sales, in my opinion.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Bettina, for the question. You touched on a few things, but thematically, I think what we were talking about here is a personal human relationship versus technology, and sometimes those things don't go hand in hand. And I think one of the best examples of that are chatbots. And a lot of companies raced to create chatbots, and I think the ones that did it well realized that chatbots do not replace humans. They supplement them. The companies that really screwed it up were the ones that said, we're going to save money in our customer service department by firing all the humans and replacing them with chatbots.
Exactly.
Right? And that isn't going to work, because people don't want to talk to chatbots all the time. Obviously, we talk to computers all the time. We talk to Alexa, we talk to Siri, we talk to Google. And for certain things, a chatbot works just fine. If somebody wants to know the number of calories in a Big Mac, a chatbot can answer that, right?
Exactly.
But as we have more particular interactions that are our experiences, that we want to talk to a company about, that are unique, a chatbot's not going to solve it. And so, to me, a hybrid model is generally the answer. That you can't go so far down the path of AI and technology that you lose the human element. But a lot of companies can't afford to only have the human element because it's too expensive. And so usually the answer lies somewhere in the middle, and depending on how big of a company you are, is going to depend on where, in that cycle you might end up.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Yeah, the hybrid, it seems to be what's working for us, because I try as a CEO I feel like people do things, and other businesses do things when they see you do it yourself.
Yep.
Do you notice that? Like,
Yeah.
I have to take action on my end to show how it can be done.
Yep.
Because the bigger brands, the bigger companies, they have their own way of doing things. And so a lot of things, it changes, that they do, small businesses often having to, oh, so and so is doing it. Sometimes it may not work for your business. So, yeah.
Totally. Thank you. Thanks so much,
Thank you
Bettina.
so much.
Chris, let's unmute you. So cool to see you here. How do you know Dan?
I'll give you the real quick story. Dan and I actually met just kind of in the theme of this particular event. Dan and I met face to face at a social media event in Atlanta, down in Mary's neck of the woods, back in 2014. And now we are best friends speaking at similar social media marketing events all around the United States. So when he says this idea of being responsive and actually doing active, proactive social listening, he isn't kidding. And Dan is a very, very good friend of mine who I first met through Twitter.
Isn't it amazing though? Like, oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Yvonne. Actually, what's funny about literally the moment Chris and I met is we were sitting at a social media conference and we were watching a panel that was called Marketing to Millennials. And I noticed that I was sitting next to a millennial which I am not, by the way, while we were sitting and listening to this panel. So I leaned over to Chris and I said, does it strike you as odd that this panel is called Marketing to Millennials and there's not a single millennial up on stage? And he laughed, and that was sort of the beginning of our friendship. But it is, like he says, that was, to me, that kind of ruined the experience of that panel, because I was like, I don't want to hear a bunch of old marketers telling me how to market to millennials. I want to hear millennials tell me how they want to be marketed to. And that's a really big difference. And so Chris was one of my very first and best millennial friends.
That is so cool. Chris, so how do you market to millennials? It sounds like you're in the customer experience as well. Is that right?
I try and stay on the cutting edge of different social media storytelling tactics. I don't get as deep into the research end of things as someone like Mary does. She's doing some phenomenal work down there with Orthix. But I'm really more of a social media speaker and a storyteller. So I really try and ride that wave and kind of stay ahead of the curve from a social media storytelling perspective. And then I try and grab my friends like Dan, who are on that other side of the millennial curve there, and bring him forward with us as well. So it's been great. It's been really cool over the last year getting a chance to see Dan up on stage. I know I'm a big fan of his book. I don't know if you...
Yeah.
I didn't pay him to do that.
Customer care. And so I know that we're almost out of time. So Dan, my big question for you was, where can we expect to maybe see you on stage in 2020? And are you available to do more speaking this year?
Well, I have to return the favor because I did not ask Chris to do that. But here's Chris's book. It's called 50 States in 100 Days, the book. And it is of his amazing journey where he went to every one of the United States in 100 days and volunteered for a nonprofit organization in each one, which was
super cool.
And fun fact, if you ask Chris, if you name any state in the U.S., and you thought I challenge you to do this right now, you name any state in the U.S., he will tell you what city he visited, what organization he visited, the name of the person that he worked with, and what he did that day, and probably how the weather was that day. It's pretty remarkable. But anyway, thank you for asking, Chris. I actually am doing a lot more speaking this year, and we'll be at a couple of big public events. Like both of us will be at Social Media Marketing World in San Diego in March. At the end of this month, I'll be down in Nashville at the Customer Contact Week. And then doing a number of speeches for private ones for companies and other events that I'm pretty excited about. So it's a lot of fun. It's one of the most fun things that I do.
I love that. I love that. If you want to see Dan, you know where to get him. But before we finish, Dan, there is on our page on am.geek.com/live, right next to this video, there is a giveaway, 4 things that every marketer must know about customer experience. So let's do a little teaser. Let us know what's in that, and we kind of let everybody know where they can get it and how they can follow you and find you online.
Absolutely. So yeah, I come at customer experience from a marketer's perspective because my 20 plus years in corporate America, that's mostly what I did. Was I worked in marketing and pretty much every marketing channel you can imagine, except I really haven't done a lot of TV. But I think that marketers have to pay attention to customer experience, because ultimately, if that becomes the brand differentiator, then that's what marketers have to sell. They have to sell the experience, not the brand, not the company, not the product or the service, but the experience that comes along with it. So I gave you 4 tips in there, and I will say that one of them is what Bettina brought up, which is AI, and how to use AI, but not to abuse AI, so that your customers can benefit from it, and even your agents can benefit from it, but it doesn't take away the human aspect of it. And as Chris mentioned, I'm very active on Twitter, so you can meet me there at Gingiss or on LinkedIn. And my website is my name, it's dangingiss.com, and you can learn all about me there and connect with me. I do send out a bi-weekly newsletter where I collect what I think are the best customer experience articles, studies, etc. around, and I share them so that you don't have to do the work finding them, and you can sign up for that on my website as well.
I love that. So I definitely got that copy. I recommend everyone else do the same. I'm thatgeek.com/live. Right next to this video, click the link and you'll get directly to the white paper, and you can know exactly what you need to do for 2020 to stand out beyond price, beyond brand, beyond just marketing, how to develop that emotional connections with your customers so you can retain them longer. And not lose like $1 million every year, right? Because of customers leaving you. So Dan, thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody who joined us. It was fantastic meeting you, Mary and Chris and Bettina and Adil. Awesome. Next week, actually, we are going to talk about the propaganda, exactly what you mentioned right now, Dan. How the bots and the propaganda and the Cambridge Analytica is affecting marketing and our relationships with each other and the view of reality. So hopefully you'll join us next Thursday, 2 Thursdays from now, 1 p.m. Central. I'm thatgeek.com. Thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Yay. See you later. Bye-bye.